SITREP World Briefing for August 10, 2026. Syria and Russia have reached a deal ending Moscow's military use of two strategic bases on Syria's Mediterranean coast. Under the agreement, Damascus will take control of the Maymim air base and the naval facility at Tartus, both of which Russia had used for years to project force into Syria and the wider eastern Mediterranean. The decision removes Russia from installations that were central to its wartime role, and it gives Syria direct authority over sites that had long symbolized Moscow's entrenched military presence in the country. The two facilities carried strategic weight because they gave Russia both an air hub and a warm-water naval foothold beyond the former Soviet space. Maymim, in Latakia province, served as the command center for Russian air operations after Moscow intervened in 2015, while Tartus gave the Russian Navy a Mediterranean logistics point. Their military value rose as Russia used them to sustain Assad's government during some of the war's phases. Ending military use marks more than an administrative transfer. It closes a chapter in Moscow's direct expeditionary posture in Syria. For Syria's leadership, the agreement is a statement about sovereignty after years in which foreign militaries shaped events on Syrian territory. Damascus is reclaiming installations that once anchored outside support for Assad. For Russia, the move comes as its military resources and diplomatic bandwidth remain stretched by the war against Ukraine. The handover will be watched closely by regional governments because any change at Maymim and Tartus affects naval access, air corridors, and the balance of influence along the Mediterranean littoral. Russia and Ukraine exchanged another round of deadly overnight strikes, with attacks killing civilians and injuring many more on both sides as the war's long-range phase intensified. In Ukraine, Russian bombardments over the past 24 hours killed 13 people and wounded about 90 others, according to the reported toll carried in the latest coverage. In Russia, officials have said Ukrainian drone attacks hit border areas including Belgorod, where 5 people were reported killed. The latest barrage showed how both militaries are pressing attacks well beyond frontline positions, using missiles, drones, and other standoff systems to inflict damage deep in urban areas and rear regions. Russia has steadily expanded its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, seeking to strain air defenses, energy systems, transportation networks, and civilian morale, while Ukraine has relied more heavily on drones to strike across the border into Russian territory. Belgorod, because of its proximity to Ukraine, has become one of the Russian regions most exposed to this pressure, while Kiev and other Ukrainian cities remain regular targets of Russian strikes. Civilian casualty figures in this exchange highlighted how neither side is limiting these operations to purely military zones, and how the conflict's geography now extends far beyond trench lines and occupied areas. The latest exchange also carries broader strategic significance, as both governments try to show endurance in a war that has become one of attrition in manpower, munitions, and industrial capacity. Russian attacks on Ukrainian population centers are intended in part to force Kiev to disperse scarce interceptor systems, while Ukrainian strikes inside Russia are meant to demonstrate that Moscow cannot shield its own territory from the consequences of the invasion. With casualties reported in both countries in a single night, the pattern points to a conflict in which air raids have become a central instrument of pressure and in which each fresh strike cycle risks driving further escalation rather than opening space for de-escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected a 15-point Gaza plan put forward by U.S. President Donald Trump. Netanyahu said Israel's military would not withdraw from Gaza until Hamas is disarmed, directly contradicting the framework announced by Trump last month. The refusal indicates that the Israeli government is not prepared to trade a military exit for a political formula it considers inadequate on security, and it places disarmament of Hamas at the center of any future arrangement for the territory. The dispute matters because any post-war deal for Gaza must resolve two questions that have divided Israel, the United States, Arab governments, and Palestinian actors for months: who governs the enclave, and what security structure replaces active combat operations. Gaza's small territory has become the focal point of a wider regional struggle involving Hamas, Israel, Iran-backed groups, and outside mediators. By refusing withdrawal, Netanyahu is signaling that Israel intends to retain direct military leverage on the ground rather than accept an internationally backed transition that leaves Hamas with any residual armed capacity. Netanyahu's position also carries domestic and international implications beyond the immediate negotiations. Inside Israel, the government has framed the war's end state around eliminating Hamas as a military force, making any premature withdrawal politically and strategically difficult. For Trump, whose plan was presented as a route toward ending the fighting, the rejection is a direct challenge from a close ally in the middle of an active conflict. The breakdown suggests that even when Washington puts forward a detailed framework, the core gap remains unresolved. Israel is demanding verified disarmament before any pullout, while outside proposals are struggling to produce a mechanism that can guarantee that outcome inside Gaza. The European Climate Agency Copernicus said Western Europe recorded its hottest combined June and July since comparable records began, with an average temperature of 21.62 Cs, surpassing the previous benchmark set in 2022. The finding followed successive heat waves that pushed temperatures higher across the region, adding to a summer marked by drought, wildfire danger, and strain on water systems, agriculture, and public health. Copernicus linked the new June-July record to intense heat waves that affected Western Europe over the summer. The agency's assessment matters because Western Europe includes some of the world's most densely populated, urbanized, and economically interconnected areas, where prolonged high temperatures can drive higher electricity demand, worsen wildfire risk, reduce river flows, and increase excess deaths among older people, outdoor workers, and people without reliable cooling. The new record also reinforces a broader pattern in Europe, which has been warming faster than many other regions, and has repeatedly faced summer extremes that test governments' emergency planning and climate adaptation strategies. By overtaking the 2022 June-July record, the 2026 reading provides another benchmark for policymakers weighing investment in heat health warning systems, wildfire preparedness, water management, and more resilient infrastructure. Daniel Kinahan appeared in court in Dublin, Ireland, after being extradited from Dubai, and was charged with directing the activities of a criminal organization. The 49-year-old then spent his first night in custody in Ireland, marking a major step for Irish authorities after years in which Kinahan had been associated with organized crime allegations while living outside the country. His transfer to Dublin and formal charging hearing turned a long-running transnational pursuit into an active Irish court case, with the proceedings centered on whether prosecutors could now pursue the case directly before the Irish criminal justice system. Security arrangements around the court appearance showed how seriously the Irish state is treating the case. The Irish Prison Service bought a bulletproof and bomb-proof van to transport Kinahan to court in Dublin, a measure that reflected the perceived risks surrounding a suspect whom authorities have long linked to major criminal networks. In practical terms, that level of protection indicated that officials expected the extradition and first court hearing to draw exceptional attention, and it showed how cases involving alleged gang leadership can require prison, police, and court systems to coordinate beyond normal detention procedures. The developments in Dublin are significant because extradition from the United Arab Emirates to face charges in Ireland is not simply a procedural transfer, but a demonstration that Irish efforts against organized crime can reach beyond national borders. By bringing Kinahan from Dubai to an Irish courtroom and immediately putting the charge on the record, the authorities moved the case from intelligence, investigation, and diplomacy into a public judicial phase. What happens next will depend on the Irish courts, but the opening hearing has already established the central facts of the case. Kinahan is back in Ireland, he has been formally charged, and he is now being held in custody as the prosecution begins. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.